Now, first of all, though, I'd like to thank the organizers for having me here. It's my great privilege to be here and especially to talk in front of the Brandenburg Gate for two reasons. One, because I'm a historian, so obviously I know about the historical relevance of the Brandenburg Gate, but secondly also because the city and the gate and where the wall stood here once is very much part of my upbringing. I was 10 years old when the wall fell. My nephew is 10 years this year, so in the sense that tells you about a European future, which was a much better future than the future we're looking at the moment, because it was going into something positive and now it's quite different. So that's just a little bit for context, really. Now, I am one of the 3 million, actually we're more like 3.7 million, EU citizens who live in the UK. And we are being, excuse the language, fucked over big time by Brexit, because it takes rights away from us and it is a disgusting thing that's happening there. And I want to talk about that a little bit first, just to drive something home, because I was visiting my parents before I came here and I realized that in Germany and actually elsewhere throughout the EU, very few people talk about Brexit. They think it's a done thing. Stop it. It's not a done thing. We need your help. And not just EU citizens, because we are 3.7 million, but there are also all the British people who live in EU countries who are as affected by this as we are. So really, we're looking at 5 million lives of people being sacrificed for Brexit, and this has to stop. It started because the UK government made us bargaining chips. You can see a little button here, I'm not a bargaining chip. But unfortunately, and I say this with a heavy heart, the EU has now also played its part in it. The EU is better than that. It must be better than that. So today I call on the European Parliament to be better than that and put people before politics. But of course, this is also really about women. And women will be affected by Brexit more than men for different reasons. And that's, of course, for British women too. Brexit is the biggest threat to women's rights in the UK since the Second World War. And this is because partly the UK doesn't have a great record of securing women's rights. That's a general problem. But also because the impact of Brexit will be bigger for women. So for example, this isn't just about the economy, but the economic impact of Brexit will be more severe in industries where a lot of women work. It will have a bigger impact on the public sector that women rely on more. So quite apart from the possible watering down or doing away of women's rights themselves, this is also another effect that Brexit will have. Now that's made worse by something we've already heard. Women had no real voice in the debate before the EU referendum. They have no voice now in the negotiations. Women's rights are not part of the negotiations. So they will disappear, make no mistake. They will disappear also because Britain will have to look for trade deals with men like the guy whose embassy is right next to us, Donald Trump. And he will ask for rights to be taken away, not just for women, but all sorts of other protections for workers and so on. And so that's a big problem. It's also a particularly big problem for EU citizens who are women. Now let me explain this to you, what we will have to do very briefly. We will not have our rights secured just like this. The UK government says this all the time. It's a lie. We have to apply for something called settled status. That is a new status for which we will have fewer rights than before. This is going to happen through an app. So imagine this, you go to the App Store, download the app, scan your passport, take a selfie, have a criminal records check, even though you're there legally now. And you'll have fewer rights after that than before. We will lose voting rights for local elections, for example, the way it looks now, and many other rights. And during that checking process, women are likely to have more problems because they are more likely to not have the right records in place. So for example, if you don't have your own bank account, or if other rental agreements or things like that are only in your husband's name, you will have a problem, much more likely. Women are also often carers. They fall right through the crack. And potentially everyone who falls through the cracks could be deported. So you're looking at the possibility of deportations on an unprecedented scale. And if you've heard anything about the Windrush scandal recently, you know about how vile the policies of the UK government are towards immigrants. And just to emphasize that today, in all likelihood, the House of Commons will pass a new bill about data protection, which will take data protection rights away from immigrants, including people like me, which means that if we fall through the cracks, we will not be able to find out why. It's disgusting and absolutely shameful. That is why we need you to not think that Brexit is a done thing. We need your voices to amplify ours, to tell your governments in your countries throughout the EU that we need your help. The majority of Britons, young Britons in particular, do not want Brexit, and we have to keep fighting for a better future for them. Not least because Brexit was won only because of xenophobic lies, manipulations with Cambridge Analytica, as we now know, and other lies that are still being spun by politicians every day. And not just Nigel Farage, also the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, even the leader of the opposition. They tell people about unicorns and extrawurst and special deals that the UK can have outside of the EU. All of it is a lie. So I hope you'll join me to stand together with your European friends, not just for women, but particularly also for women, for EU citizens in the UK and for British citizens who've made their home here in Germany and elsewhere, to stop this madness, to stop lives and futures being sacrificed on the Brexit altar. Never before has it been more important for Europe to stand together against the rise of populism, of which Brexit, make no mistake, is one symptom. So I'm here because I want young girls and boys to have the same future that I had, to look in the same positive spirit that I had when I was looking at the wall falling at this place when I was 10. So thank you. I hope all of us together can keep fighting for that better future.